Greetings! This is I, Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor, here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. Are all of you ready today to once again head back into the past and learn a few things? Because yes, today we're once again diving back into the world of Dungeons & Dragons history with some more 4th edition talks. We're going to be finishing up our discussion on all the classes you can play in 4E with controllers today. So whether you're joining me, of course, live on Twitch over there, or of course later on YouTube, hey YouTube, always glad to join you. Remember, you guys, YouTube, the like, subscribe, ring the bell, do all those kind of things. My question today is, have you played controllers in 4? I know someone that's played a Druid in one of my games that I was a player in back during that time period, so, and some of the other various controller classes I have encountered. But yes, we're going to be diving into controllers today, and I'm going to preface this entire thing. I've discussed this with the priorities of a lot of the different class roles when it comes to playing in 4E. Controllers are really cool. They have a lot of great abilities. But if you are playing with fewer than your standard players, they are like the... I don't want to say they're the least useful of all the roles. They're the roles that probably is less critical to a group. What I mean by that is, if I'm building a team and I don't have a lot of players, I'm probably going to be looking at things like leaders, defenders, strikers first, that kind of group of things. Probably leaders, defenders more than anything, then strikers, then controllers. But controllers do have a lot of power and ability that makes them very useful. And as we'll go through them, there'll be more controllers that pick up little bits of some of those other classes. Like, again, we're going to start with the original one, the Wizard. And the Wizard's a very box standard control. As we kind of get with some of the mixing in little abilities from other types, that kind of begins to develop a fact that we can see playing some of those controllers is a little easier, and you don't have to worry about it as much. So we'll talk about it, though, when we get there, and I'll kind of address this at the end. But it's one of those interesting things to think about, that I've played a few 4E games back in the day, and we had a controller, but the player wasn't there all the time. We didn't need a controller. So, controllers aren't bad. They're helpful. They're not always needed. That's a tough thing, especially when we talk about team game balance. In 4E, some balance is really required still. We haven't reached the aim of 5E where you can pick a team of anything and make it work. Let us, though, begin with, of course, what I mentioned, the Wizard. I'll move myself up. So the Wizard is, of course, your standard controller. It's the one that was introduced in the Player's Handbook 1. It's the first one. It's an arcane, powerful one with key ability scores of Int, Wiz, and Dex. Bonuses to Will, 10 plus con hit points, 4 gained per level, 6 plus con healing surges. They are the scions of arcane abilities. They are meant to hinder foes over a large area, kind of hitting them with big attack spells, or controlling what they do, keeping crowd control in them. That's the entire idea, crowd control. They research magical powers, dive into very powerful abilities, master time, space, fire, mind, all these kind of different things, throwing out fireballs, mastering all kinds of spells, and cloaking them in magic. The two standard builds, War Wizard, are Control Wizard and War Wizard, if you want to take the suggested builds. They are an implement-based class, so they use orbs, staffs, and wands to help directly channel their arcane power, and now their abilities. First off, they have an Orb of Imposition. Well, you choose one of the following, depending on if you are... You choose an Implement Master, which comes in the form of Orb of Imposition, Staff of Defense, or the Wand of Accuracy. So those are the 3 you choose from. Each one gives you a unique encounter ability. The Orb of Imposition is an encounter action as a free action, with 2 effects. You kind of designate a creature And it until it makes a saving throw, it has a penalty to its wisdom modifier, and also you can affect some at-will spells with that one. The Staff of Defense grants you a +1 bonus to AC, and you get an encounter power that's an immediate interrupt that gives you a bonus to defense equal to your con modifier. The Wand of Accuracy is a free action once per encounter. All these are encounter abilities. You can add your Dex modifier to a single attack roll. Remember, you're going to be using intelligence for this, so it's an idea for using things. As I said, their ability scores are int, the wisdom, and dexterity. And yes, the Staff of Defense also needs Constitution, but that's a build if you're going for that. Now, the second thing they get is a cantrips. They get technically 4 cantrips that you have that are at-will powers that you just have. They're minor spells. Ghost Sound, Light, Mage Hand, Prestidigitation. I'm not going to get into what they do. They're not attack abilities. They're little at-will things that you can do. If you've played any other D&Ds, like Pathfinder, you've heard of these spells before. You generally have an idea. Ghost Sound makes a noise. Light creates light. Mage Hand has a little hand. You can do things at a range. Prestidigitation has little effects. You get ritual casting. Now we have to talk about a spellbook. Because the spellbook, normally you call it like, oh, it's a ritual book. It's where you keep all your rituals. That's a thing that ritual casters traditionally have. And yes, a wizard gets rituals. They get 3 at first level, and as they gain some levels, get additional rituals to their book. It's not the only thing a spellbook does for a wizard. They also put their daily and utility spells in it. You may ask, well, why does that matter? Well, here's the thing. At the beginning, 2 daily spells that you put in your spellbook. Anytime you gain a utility spell or a daily spell, you gain an additional 2. Well, okay. That means a lot. Well, for each of those times, you put one of those in, you memorize 1 you can use per day. So for those first 2 daily spells you got at first level, you get to use 1 of them. For those 2, when you put 2 utility spells, you get to use 1 of them. When you put 2 more daily spells, you get to use 1 of them. Basically, at an extended rest, you can prepare any number of daily and utility spells according to what you can cast per day for your level. You can't prepare the same spell twice. That's it. It's basically however many daily and utility spells you should know, matching what other people have. You can prepare them for the day. And those are your daily and utilities for that day. And you can cast per what your level would be. And you can't prepare the same one twice. I can't have 2 of my first level daily spell. Well, I can only use 1 anyway at first level, so it doesn't matter. But effectively, I have a book of all these dailies and utilities, and I kind of choose which ones I use. I have options more. It's one of those things that wizards have always had with having spellbooks, options that they can change out per day, and they do the same here in 4E. Now you can replace a spell because of gaining a level or through retraining. The previous spell vanishes and is replaced by a new one. Keep that in mind too. And typically your spellbook will have 128 pages. 1 spell taking up 1, a ritual taking up a number equal to its levels, so you may have to have more than 1 book, especially if you're getting up towards that 30th level. Keep that in mind. But that's effectively some basics of how the wizard works. And yeah, you can see that nothing about it necessarily, with its natural abilities, screams controller, for the idea of a controller. Really, when it comes down to it, when we start talking controller, we talk about their abilities. Some of the things like their at-will powers, their encounter powers, their daily powers. Most of their encounter and daily, at least for first level, tend to be group attacks, attacking bursts, areas, things like that. Some of them are single target, and yes, their at-wills tend to be more single target. But nonetheless, that's where we get into the controller aspect of hitting multiple targets, controlling the battlefield, affecting things, and the other aspect being, with control, comes options. And that's where their spellbook really comes in. In this case, when we begin to look into some of the other controllers, we'll see how they kind of fit into the controller aspect and what makes them unique in their abilities. We've seen in some of the other different groups, strikers, targeting things and doing extra damage. You know, defenders, basically marking targets and making them draw the target, them to be themselves. Leaders with healing abilities or buff abilities that specifically are matched to them. Controllers, yeah, they hit multiple targets. Nothing really fancy in a way. It still is fancy because there's not as many multiple target effects. Now let's talk, of course, Druid. So this is our primal controller, our first one we're getting in. That they're dealing with natural abilities. Communicating with natural world. Wisdom, dexterity, constitution being ability scores. Smaller bonuses to reflex and will. 12 plus con hit points. 5 gain per level. 7 plus con for healing surge. They make their wilderness their home. They're cunning. They speak with trees and animals. They mess around with natural forces. They regard all the challenges they face as tests. They are protectors of the wild and what's going on in nature, connected with beasts and the natural energies of the universe, the primal ones, maybe calling on even natural spirits to aid them. If you're looking for some basic suggested builds, it's Predator, Druid, and Guardian. And also they do use implements too, staffs and totems as focuses of their primal energy. Let's talk about their features, though. We should mention those. So, they do begin with 3 at-will attack powers. Throughout their time as a druid, at least one of those powers, and no more than 2, must have the beast form keyword. It means they have access to an attack either in beast or humanoid form. Keep that in mind. But that's their balance of nature because they balance between being humanoid and a little bit of a beast. Now, they also have a primal aspect. And you choose one of 2, at least in the original book, Player's Handbook 2, where they were introduced to begin with. There might be more druid aspects, primal aspects from other ones, but the perms to begin with are Primal Guardian or Primal Predator. Remember, I said the builds are Guardian and Predator. Hey, guess what? You're choosing one of those primal aspects to that. And again, there will be some connections with some of the abilities you have and powers connected to your primal choice. So also keep that in mind. Certain encounter powers or daily powers and things like that will have extra effects if you are a Primal Guardian or Primal Predator. This was a thing that was introduced in Player's Handbook, the Player's Handbook 2. Now they are also a Ritual Caster. They gain Ritual Caster as a bonus feat, allowing you to match rituals. They have a ritual book with 2 to begin with. And, you know, they also get Animal Messenger. Well, one of them is Animal Messenger, another first level ritual. Now they also get a Wild Shape. They basically change their physical form. They have an at-will Wild Shape. Allows the form of a beast, and allows you to use powers with the beast form keyword. And, you know, those are connected specifically to your beast form. You assume it as the form of any kind of natural or fey beast. 4-legged mammalian predator, like a bear, boar, panther, wolf, wolverine. It could be shadowy. It could be an incarnation of it. It doesn't have to be specific. But basically, you change your form. It doesn't change any of your statistics whatsoever. It just accesses certain powers. So they, yes, have this Wild Shape as an at-will, which is a minor action. And it's got its own abilities that you can talk about. And then you activate abilities and have certain things that are beast form powers that you can use connected to those. And yes, some of your encounter powers are then specifically beast form abilities. Some of your dailies are beast form. So it's sort of like, are you using beast form? Are you using normal form? That's when it kind of comes into. And there's an interesting aspect of the Druid using the beast form that gives you additional abilities and stuff like that. Or using your natural spells also in your human form. It gives you a bit of options once more. Maybe your beast form will be much better for dealing out some damage. Certainly you're not getting anything that screams Striker or Defender or something like that. But it means if you are needed in a more one-on-one style combat, or your group on a few targets, maybe your beast form would be better suited. On the other hand, maybe instead of doing that, you could be more in your natural form and use a number of your other abilities. And they do have some multiple target abilities in groups, so that's what it comes down to, groups and bursts and stuff like that. They're more the controller aspect. So you can see, yeah, they don't have the spell options, the daily utility options that a wizard has, but your druid now is getting into options of, hey, I can take this beast form, which is whatever I define it to be. Again, I would look into, you know, again, it's a minor action switch back and forth between humanoid and beast, and allows you to then use your specific beast powers, and you'd have to switch back to do your other powers, and that meant your minor actions. You can switch from round to round. It's an at-will ability. It means maybe one round, it's easier for you to hit with a beast attack. In the next round, you have to shoot out some kind of elemental attack. You switch back and forth. That kind of variety is an aspect of controllers. We can see that here. Yes, the general idea is, I hit multiple targets, but no, the controller is kind of, and again, why it is not as critical, it's the jack of all trades in a little while. And it's an interesting place to be when certain classes, like rogues or bards or jacks of all trades, and old ones, controllers are that kind of like, maybe not outside of combat jack of all trades, combat jack of all trades. Maybe that's the better way to think of control. And we're seeing that here, where they have a variety of abilities and they can choose what's appropriate as needed. Alright, let's talk about this. The Invoker. This nice dude here. Now, Invokers are once again controller, but they are divine controllers. So they deal with divine energies. They are wisdom, constitution, intelligence. They get a small bonus to all 3 fort, reflex, and will. 10 plus con for 6 plus con for the healing base and hit points. So this is your divine warrior controller. This is your, you know, probably you're not going to be healing as much. You're targeting more targets, that kind of thing. You're not like the divine person that's doing that. Now, there's Preserver and Wrathful Invokers for the basic builds if you want to check those out. For options. And, like other divine characters, Invokers do choose a deity, which you have to make sure it relatively matches your alignments. They make use of holy symbols for their implements. And they do have a channel divinity. Similar to a cleric has a channel divinity, so does an invoker. But invoker's powers are 2 of them. You get a Rebuke Undead, basically an anti-undead ability, and one determined by your Divine Covenant. So your Divine Covenant is the other major choice you must take. And again, it determines your 2 channel abilities, which are encounter powers. If you go back to the cleric, we talked about clerics, they have channel divinity. They could use it a number of times. They were an encounter ability they had. Again, it's a similar thing, except in this case, you know, you can use it twice. The 2 different Invoker ones are, of course, the Armor of Wrath and Preserver's Rebuke. Turns out, you know, the 2 builds, once again, Preserver and Wrathful Invokers are based on the Divine Covenants you have. So if more are introduced in books after here, I'm not going to go into them, but that would be your kind of option. The idea is an Invoker goes through a lot of study, gets a final Covenant, and gets one of the 2 abilities. Now, the 2 Covenants are Covenant of Preservation, Covenant of Wrath are the 2 they have here, and yes, they give the channel ability. The Preserver gives the Preserver's Rebuke, and when you use a Divine Encounter or Daily Attack power on your turn, you can slide an ally within 10 squares of you 1 square. Now, this is the first time, and I'm going to tell you there are other points in time where this is a major effect of controllers. Controllers do target multiple abilities, but controllers also control the battlefield. And moving characters around, manipulating positions, is another part of the controller's aspect. We don't see it as much with our first two here. Druid, we do see a little bit of it. I didn't talk a little bit about it because those are deeper into the powers that they have. As someone, again, who played with a Druid before, I could see that they had powers to manipulate the battlefield a little bit and move things around. Granted, we see this a little bit here in targeting multiple things and moving around the battlefield to a degree. Other classes have had to move around the battlefield and manipulate, positioning a little bit too. But again, we can see this is just an extra we have here. And then the Covenant of Wrath gives you Armor of Wrath as the Channel Divinity. They get bonus to their damage rolls equal to 1 for each enemy you attack with the power when they use an encounter or damage. So they get bonus damage for the more targets they hit. So, yeah, targeting one person, I get 1 extra damage. Oh, hey, I'm targeting 5 people with this effect. My effect does 5 damage extra to all of them. And they also get ritual casting one too. And they can use they get the Hand of Fate and 1 first level ritual, and they can use the Hand of Fate without expending components once per day. I'm not going to get into what that does. If you want to look it up, you can. But there you go. That's the basics of the Invoker as we've seen it here. And again, they have a combination of whatever covenant you had does make an effect on certain abilities you have, and we can see various things that target multiple creatures from both encounter and daily powers. A lot of multiple targets in other build types. Your leaders, your defenders, your strikers, all tend to be daily abilities. When we get into controllers, we have encounter abilities that focus more on multiple targets. Not that we couldn't have those occasionally in other places, but this particular has a lot more of it. Of creatures in burst, 1, 2, or 3 creatures. In fact, I will tell you, 3 out of 4 of the Invoker's first level encounter powers, their prayers, are all multiple target things. They are built for multiple targets. It is a big part of that. Some of their at-will abilities can target multiple creatures. That is the possibility of a controller. And I didn't really talk about this, but if you want to look into the other classes I've already talked about, it's the same way. Some of their abilities will target multiple things because it's part of their nature. Targeting multiple things, dealing out damage in groups, and then a little bit of options and manipulation. In this case, extra damage or the moving things around are kind of your extra options. You don't have as much of the options part that we had in Druids and Wizards as before, but we have a lot more explodey abilities from Invoker. Explodey abilities. More. I feel like when looking at them, after I've looked at the other ones, they tend to have a little bit more multiple target things. It's a little bit more of a focus on them. Not to say the others didn't have that focus. The others had a little bit more options focus, combined with area effects. They are primarily looking at less options, more area. So, trade-offs here. But all in the nature of controllers for nonetheless. As we discussed. Okay. So now we've talked about our standard 3 here. We've gone to Invoker. Let's move on to Player's Handbook 3 because we do have a couple over here. We have, of course, the Scion. Now the Scion, we are our Psionic group. We're dealing with Mind Power. Player's Handbook 3 introduced to our Psionic group of characters. That's what we're dealing with here. Psychic Forces, Int, Charisma, Wisdom, bonuses to Will, 12 plus Con for 6 plus Con for the various healing things. They are when we talk about Psionic abilities, Psionic as a power source, Scions are the quintessential thing. Sort of like when we talk about arcane energies, Wizards are that top tier, like Yeah, they're the ones that are doing the most manipulation of arcane energies. They are diving the deepest into it. Not saying anybody else isn't doing arcane stuff, but wizards are going heavy, heavy, heavy into it. Scions are going heavy, heavy into the psionic. They are the masters of mental abilities, whether they're, you know, kind of locking in and reading minds, maneuvering objects with their minds, controlling beings, all that kind of stuff. They're dealing with the mental energies of the universe. Now, they have two basic builds, if you're going for the suggested builds, telekinetic and telepathic. Let's talk about them too. Now, they do use implements, orbs and staffs, for their psionic implements. And they do have psionic power points. I've kind of vaguely gone over how those work. I haven't gone into depths about them with other psionic classes. It's the same way here. I'm not necessarily going to go into depths about it. But similar to a lot of other classes introduced after the ones in the Player's Handbook 1, they have options that if you choose those options, it determines stuff. In this case, you basically focus your art abilities and choose telekinetic focus or telepathic focus, and you gain powers that are connected to those. If you choose telekinesis, you get far hand and forceful push. Telepathy gets power distract and seek thoughts. Those are all your class feature powers. You get 2 of them for whatever type of scion you have, and again, it's the 2 types of scions that we talk about. They also get some ritual casting. They either get Sending or Tensorsolar Disc. Yep. And they can use that one without expending components once per day, and it has 1 other first level ritual book, so they get the bonus feat. Welcome. Talking 40, but welcome. Hello. So yes, and after that, when it comes to scions, we really have to look at their powers again. It's kind of like, sure, when we talk about druids and invokers, they had some class features that really made them a little different and made them a little thing. Scions are very wizard, except they have the psionic augmentation. You know, I think that's the big thing that's a difference between them, is they have the psionic augmentation, they've got the power points, they can, you know, use those power points to buff up different things, but after that, yeah, they're very psionic. Yes. Their encounter abilities are made from their class features, so keep that in mind. And then it really comes to their at-wills and dailies, which are really the ones that they augment a lot of it. And those augmentations traditionally hit those area of effects a lot more. So it's sort of like my normal abilities, except for a few, just target one, and then I augment up to hitting multiple groups of creatures and different and things like that, and different targets. And again, it comes down to a lot of their abilities are multiple. Yeah, you know, you'd have to augment your at-wills, have them usually be a little bit more burst or hit multiples and kind of stuff like that for a lot of times. Some of them are naturally that way, but yes, when we get into encounters, dailies, all that stuff, it's all about a lot of, you know, battlefield manipulation to a good degree and hitting multiple targets. It's controlling the battlefield, whether that means nuking multiple things or sliding targets, sliding allies. That's the controller. Moving things, blowing up. That's the aspect you have, and the Scion does a little bit of all of that. Scion, I think the aspect of being able to augment and having different augments for different abilities is really where we focus on the variety for having things do it. Like, some of their dailies has different augments depending on what you want to do. They have, like, a selection of 1 or 2 augments, augments 1, augment 2. So that gives some variety on their dailies. And, you know, you can see that they get other at-will disciplines. I think that's the thing is, unlike some of the others that gave encounter disciplines, you gain a lot of at-wills as a Scion. So, keep that in mind. Instead of new encounter powers, they gain at-wills. That's a thing. And then they can augment those with power points. So their at-wills are probably not going to be as strong, generally speaking, as an encounter power, but they can augment it. I guess that's the big thing I didn't really explain very well here, because it's an interesting aspect of Scion. Yeah, they don't technically gain encounter abilities. They just get at-will ones. So, unlike a lot of other classes that have, like, 2 at-will, yeah. Now, they do have a maximum number of at-wills. I will tell you that. Similarly speaking, they do have that. So, you gain new ones, and you gain a new at-will at 3rd level, but then after levels after that, when you would gain a at-will, you replace one of your other at-wills with that of that level or lower. And they're both augmented. So it's sort of like you upgrade your at-wills, which generally speaking have probably a little bit of a power creep coming in, but also your augments are where the main thing of those happening in. So it's sort of like my natural abilities get better, and those first level ones, those first level at-will disciplines, don't level. So keep that in mind. Remember, a lot of at-wills, as you level up, they get better. These don't, because you can be replacing them. They're an interesting at-will build. I guess I should call it. Signs are an at-will build. Anyway. Okay. Let's talk Seeker. The Seekers. Now this is also from Bladesinger Book 3. We haven't gotten beyond that. But we have another controller, a primal controller. Well, didn't we have a Druid before? Yeah, but a Seeker, you know, goes through ancient ceremonies and invocations, calls upon primal spirits that lend you to their cause. So, where a Druid might kind of call on spirits, they're like doing all aspects of nature. A Seeker's like just specifically a little bit. They are more primal champions, using wisdom, strength, and dexterity, bonus to reflex and will, 12 plus con, 5, 7 plus con, for the hit point stuff. They also go into like hunting techniques, using bow techniques, weapon techniques, primal evocations, kind of combining all these things together. They're a hunter and a mystic together, so they're kind of doing a little bit of rangery stuff, a little bit of druidy stuff. They're kind of this at-the-mill intersection of the primal abilities, which isn't necessarily a bad place to be. Now there's Protector Seekers and Vengeful Seekers, and it comes down to their Seeker's Bond. That's one of their 2 class features, the other being their Inevitable Shot. They get the Inevitable Shot power. They can call upon the spirit to send your projectile hurling towards another enemy when you miss with a ranged attack. So effectively, this is a, oh, I shot at that guy. I missed him. My attack goes and hits someone else. That's very controllable. Then, of course, your Speaker's Bond, with the 2, the Protecting and Vengeful, are you choose either Blood Bond or Spirit Bond. With Blood Bond, you get Encasing Spirit's power, and if you're not wearing heavy armor, you can shift as a minor action, which we'll talk about shifting, because that's a power you get, class feature power. Yes. In Spirit Bond, you get the Spirit's Rebuke. You gain +1 to attack rolls, and both light and heavy armor weapons when you make a attack by throwing weapons. So it's a throwing weapon boost, too. And Spirit's Rebuke. Okay. So, let's try to explain a Seeker. Damn it. There we go. No advertisements. So yes. Get another shot, and then you either get Encouraging Spirits or Spirits Rebuke. The Encouraging Spirits, counter ability, minor action, you push something in slow. I talked about the inevitable shot, where it's a free action. It is an encounter ability, where if you miss with a range attack, you can hit another target. And the Spirit's Rebuke, an enemy misses you with a melee attack, they take a hit back. Then they get their at-wills, which of course grants them some abilities that target multiple things, or can target multiple things. Effectively, like, some of them are one creature, and then some they have effects in areas. And I think Seeker is a bigger hit on battlefield movements and manipulations and stuff like that. So that's kind of a thing you can keep in mind. You get those kind of like... Also, like, again, you have to remember, shifting is your kind of move. It's a 5-foot step. It's a minor action that you can do with the Bloodbound. So it's normally kind of like your move. So keep that in mind for shifting. Sorry. That is an actual thing you do. It's one of the normal mechanics. I think I didn't... I have to specify these things if you don't remember them. You know, I'm keeping my mind too. And anyway, the Seeker is a lot more about, you know, you hit one target and then stuff around that target occurs, almost. It's, I think, the best way you look at it. You hit someone with a damaging effect, and then there's a penalty or a movement around them. So it's a lot less big burst damage and more, I hit someone, and then maybe people around them take damage, or people around them take penalties, and people around them have things. I'm basically, like, creating area zones of control. So, yes, it might be multiple damage to multiple targets, but it also is buffs and penalties and movements around targets that I'm kind of targeting things. And remember, I have that encounter ability that if I miss someone, I can hit someone else nearby them. So the person I targeted, or try to hit someone nearby them, might also get additional, you know, effects on them, depending on where I'm targeting. That I can move these things around, and I get, basically once per encounter, 2 attempts to hit someone with these things. And yes, they are, some of them have, they do have some melee effects, but they are more bow ranged effects, that they're firing out these primal abilities with their ranged attacks that are having these effects, where, like, I'm hitting you with some spirits, or hitting a swarm around you, I'm causing, like, thorns to grow around you, vines to grow around you, weird sparks of electricity to hit your things, you know, ice to fill a zone around you. These things that, you know, yes, I'm both targeting one creature and not targeting one creature. I think it's an interesting aspect of the Seeker that they are very single but multiple target. Again, being a controller, but they are less focused on that damage aspect and more focused on being a buff movement controller. And again, depending on your powers that you choose, you can kind of figure out where in that build you want to do. Do I want to focus more on manipulating and moving things around, or do I want to focus more on having specific, you know, penalties or damage effects? You kind of go what you want with the Seeker. Kind of interesting in that. Now let's talk about a different form of wizard. The Mage. Yes, this is when we're getting into a number of books. Gave us specifically different builds that are unique, and the Mage is a specialized wizard, basically. They choose Con, Wisdom, or Charisma as their stats. So they are... Remember, we had Dex and Wisdom before, so now we not have Con. Dex is out the window, and then one of 2 stats. So we're already going outside. We're still an arcane controller. We're still we're a specialized different type of wizard we're getting into, which these were introduced later on for more interesting, slight variations on character builds. This is from the Heroes of the Fallen Lands book, if you want to look into it. We've gone beyond the player's handbooks now. And again, you choose, you get +2 will, 6+ hit points, healing surge, 10+ con, 4 hit points, all that kind of stuff. You choose a School of Magic, which the 3 that were introduced in this book were Enchantment, Evocation, and Illusion. So, we're not even looking at those implement bonuses now. We're kind of throwing those out the window. We've got a School of Magic we're talking about. Of magic. And that School of Magic ends up giving us abilities. Those ones are where our focus comes to for our abilities. Now, they do have a spellbook, like we talked about. And the School of Magic itself basically organizes their techniques a little bit. There are other schools that do exist, the other schools of magic and abilities, that basically you choose from any spell the list of wizard's powers. You learn extra secrets and techniques granted within certain ones if they are of your school. That's kind of how you kind of keep it in mind. If you choose a power of your school, you get bonuses. And they do talk about all the abilities that were kind of out before, and when you, like, specialize in some of them, you get bonuses. If you're doing an enchantment and evocation, illusion. So yes, you get additional techniques and methods for those specific types of spells. So it's very reinventing the wizard in a way. Also at first level, you choose that you gain the Apprentice Mage benefit of that school. Which, we'll go to that page here. Oops. Which, just to kind of go over that a little bit of schools. Basically, at certain levels, you gain additional bonuses depending on the school you choose. 1st, 5th, 10th, 11th. You get augmentations there. You get also changes to your enchantment counter powers, utility, and stuff like that, specifically at levels. Same for evocation. Same for illusion. So yes, it's another leg. And yes, so basically your wizard's pretty much the same, except you're getting rid of the implement bonuses, and you're getting these school bonuses that have different effects at different levels. You have to check them out. I'll give you the first level one. When you use an arcane enchantment power, allows you to push, pull, or slide a creature. The maximum different distance of the force movement is increased by 2 squares. That's it. That's your first level enchantment apprentice one. So it just makes you, oh, I'm specialized in enchantment as a wizard. I can push them a little farther. And yes, it's in a way, it removes the variety your mage has in a way. And I think that's an additional thing that we kind of have to talk about with the mage's spellbook in a way. Is that you prepare your attack powers, daily powers, utility powers for spellbook. And your at-wills, cantrip, and non-wizards are granted you by your powers. You don't have them in your... It's just the fact that you don't have the same kind of large amount of spells in Mage's spellbook as you do in a Wizard's. You focus more. Think about that. And you then get back bonuses if you use specifically spells based on your school. Wizard, right. I talked about that being an important part of a Wizard's build. This is being still controllery, whether it's being manipulation, trickery. Again, think about it. Enchantment, Evocation, Illusion. Why they give those three? Enchantment. Probably terrain and movement manipulation. Invoker. Extra damage, hitting multiple targets. Illusion. Bonuses and penalties. Talk about Seeker doing those things, but with kind of range attacks. We're doing the Mage now, which we're kind of altering what a wizard does. It's still a wizard, but it's different now. It is different in a lot of the ways it functions with its spellbook and with its powers. But the powers are very much the same. A lot of the stuff is much the same. We are just taking the aspect of it and making something a little new and different. And again, being very controller, but you're choosing the type of control a lot more. You're removing a lot of choice and going specialty with a mage. Normal wizard, variety, mage, focus. There we go. I think I've explained that hopefully decently. It's one of those things that's not always necessarily easy to explain these things in succinct words, but I tried. Alright. Let's talk about a Seeker. What's a Seeker? A Seeker is Warlock. But is a controller Warlock. Well, or I'm sorry, Binder. Talk about a Binder. That was my brain saying the wrong word. A Binder is a controller Warlock. It's an arcane Warlock using Charisma and then Dex or Intelligence. And they bind the power of extra trainer abilities to their will through the use of Mystic World's true names and arcane symbols and talismans. A Binder doesn't call upon one master, unlike a normal Warlock, but basically might call upon several different creatures and entities for channeling their arcane powers. So they are a Warlock, but a variety Warlock, which makes them more of a controller. Bonus to Dex and Reflex and Will. Starts with 12 plus Con, 5 hit points gained per level, 6 plus Con for Constitution, and their implements are rods and wands. So, like a normal Warlock, a Binder forges a pact with a powerful planar entity, channeling the arcane power that bestows. Your choice of pact has an important effect on the powers and abilities you gain. So they still have a primary pact, which the two are Gloom Pact and Star Pact. Star Pact, rather than one being in the stars, it is just basically the Far Realm in general. You're kind of making a pact with Gloom, you're kind of making a pact with Shadowfell. So you're seeing it's a little different, that it's more like an entire region or area that you're kind of diving into a little bit with there. Then they get the Shadowfall's ability for a Binder, a Pact Boon, which depends, of course, on which pact you choose. They also get Shadow Walk, Shadow Twist, the pact encounter power, and a daily encounter power. And the encounter power depends on your pact, whether you're Gloom or Star again. But your dailies, when you start splitting up a lot more, and you also gain more. You still have access to first level Warlock or multiple level Warlock abilities. It's basically when you get to your daily powers for first level and beyond there's just more options, but you still have all the old ones too. Technically, Shadow Twist, you gain bonus to range attacks and area attack rolls against an enemy that has no other creature adjacent to it. Shadow Walk. During your turn, if you move more than 3 squares, you get partial concealment. And yeah. Now just kind of to talk about the Gloom and Pact. Again, for talking about Gloom Binder, in this case for being a Binder, it's what chooses your 2 at-wills and your encounter for first level. And then at certain other levels, you do gain other abilities and different choices and other encounters, too, that are particularly made to that version if you're Gloom or Star Pact Binder. And really, it's an extra layer on top of Warlock. It's with your dailies, with your encounters that they give you, with your at-wills. A lot of Warlock, some Warlock, dailies function very controller because they're dailies, because they're big effects. They're powerful effects that can affect the board. That's the point of them. Granting you encounter abilities or effectively hacked abilities that are specifically made to make you more controllery is what makes this more controllery rather than a striker. And of course the natural abilities that you get for your shadow abilities. Remember, I said the shadow twist, you get bonuses to hitting multiple targets. Shadow walk, it moves you around. And if you really want to go, take basically the powers that are mentioned in the book. I'm not going to lie, the powers in the book are going to be more burst and effective areas. The daily powers, the utility powers, are going to be more binder, area, controller effects. And you do things like attack swords and stuff like that, and all the normal stuff you get for classes. It's just, again, in this case, it's like I'm building a normal warlock to begin with, but being a binder and choosing one of the binder packs, then combining that with choosing, of course, the abilities of whatever pack I chose, makes me a controller. It's an evolution and a change in class. I like these two, because they take the style and the basic build of some other classes and evolve them into something new and different. Now, from the... this was the Heroes of the Shadow book. The binder was in. If you want to look for which book it was originally in, and play with it. Now, from the Neverwinter campaign setting, we have the Bladesinger, which is another basic wizard. But why is it different? Well, let's talk about why a Bladesinger is a different type of wizard. They're an arcane controller. But rather than your basic wizard that we had before, they mixed swordplay and spellcasting. This is a build that is a controller build, but also gives a little bit of martial build into it. Int and Dexterity are two ability scores, and the idea is you're mixing slashing with spells. And Bladesingers are a traditional prestige class. I mean, it's the Eldritch Knight is kind of a version of a Bladesinger, so if you're talking about that for the prestige class, with that in 5th edition, for what you're talking about big type of fighter, that's kind of where you're in. But this one is a little bit more built off of a spellcaster than built off of a melee character. Bonus to will, 12 plus con, and 5 hit points for your hit points, 7 plus con for healing surges. So those are kind of where we start out with Bladesinger. Now, let's talk about your first level abilities as a Bladesinger and what it means. What do you get? Well, I'm a Bladesinger. I get different abilities than your average wizard. For first level, I get Instinctive Attack. When you make a basic melee attack with a weapon in one hand, you can use your intelligence instead of strength for attack rolls and damage rolls. Basically, it's made to make your weapon use intelligence. It's as simple as that. And having powers that maybe use weapons is intelligence-based. You get Guard and Flourish. Your range attacks and area attacks do not provoke attack of opportunities while you're holding a one-handed weapon. In addition, you gain a shield bonus to AC when you're wearing light armor or no armor and holding a one-handed weapon in one hand and nothing in the other. So, I get bonuses to AC. I can use all my area range effects while in melee combat, so I can switch between sword and spell without provoking. You get Blade Magic. You choose your one-handed bladed weapon, which you have proficiency, light or heavy blade, or choose a one-handed melee weapon. You gain proficiency as it is an implement. Meaning you can use implement powers through it. It counts as a wand for you, although it can only be enchanted as a weapon. And then you also get Blade Song, which is an encounter ability, which effectively gives you bonuses to attack rolls and defenses, and damage when you use your Blade Song ability. And of course you have a spellbook. Hey, spellbook! Once again, you have that. At the levels it functions like a normal wizard spellbook. At certain levels, you gain 2 powers. You memorize the by level kind of thing. One of the things that they don't do is ritual. But there's a chart to figure out what you prepare per day and when you learn powers. But when you learn the powers, you gain 2 like a normal wizard, and then you prepare only a certain number depending on your level and stuff like that. It works much the way that normal wizards work in that. But then you have blade spells, which they have their own unique at-wills. And they will have the blade spell keyword on them. And blade spells, well, they're no actions, but they're used with a weapon attack. So you're going to be using basic melee attacks. And when you strike something with a basic melee attack, you use a blade spell. So every successful strike unleashes a spell. The blade spells cost no action. Yes. And effectively, it's like when you hit someone, it does some extra things. You're doing extra spells. So they're not doing like massive dices of spells. It's, I'm hitting someone, I'm casting one of my at-will blade spells, which you get 3 of your choice. I'm still doing my weapon damage, which remember, I'm a Bladesinger. I can use my intelligence to hit and deal damage. Not my strength or dexterity. And then having an effect. And some of these blade spells don't necessarily have to target when you're hitting. Why is that? Because they have a range on them. You hit an enemy with a melee basic attack while using one-handed, your other hand holds no weapons. And then one creature within range, could be the one you're hitting, could be another one, just gets hit by something. Or gets attacked by, triggered by something. And a lot of these, because they are minor effects. You already hit with a weapon, he's doing something else either to another creature nearby, or the one you already hit. And that's the thing, because they have a range of all of these, it means I can be my controller. I hit you with my sword, just like a good wizard attack, a basic wizard attack, and then I do something to one of your buddies. There you go. Whether it's extra damage or smaller other effects, there you go. And they do have some wizard effects that also have various things depending on what they are. You can check their stuff like there. And they also do get the cantrips. Including an encounter cantrip of suggestions. So that's very interesting too. So, yes, at your first level, you get your blade spells, which you get 3 of. You get your Bladesinger spellbook, get your daily Bladesinger cantrip, and you also get, magic missile. You do get magic missile action. So, it's the famous cantrip. So, technically speaking, you have 3 blade spells and a magic missile for first level, plus, of course, the cantrips. And the 3 cantrips of your choice from Light, Mage, Hand, Prestidigitation, Gross Sound, or if you want to encounter one, Suggestion. So, you're very both wizard and also warrior. And they do have some more different utility powers and daily powers at various levels that have been added on. It doesn't mean you can't use some of the normal wizard ones, but I would look up the Bladesinger for what is in there for choices, because they give you some choices at different places for things. Certain points of time you can get a freaking fireball. Or a lightning bolt, I'm sorry. And, yeah. And remember, swords and implement. Keep that in mind, too. And they do have their own Paragon passes. But that's Bladesinger, which is really cool because you're being a wizard, but also not being a wizard because you're meleeing people to the face. It's fun. We got a couple more to talk about, and we're moving on to another book that has 2 in it. What 2 controller options? Well, of course, we start with a wizard one with a witch. And this is the Heroes of the Feywild. Interesting enough. So, as a witch, you are an arcane controller. An ancient form of arcane magic, which allows you to charm, transform, or curse enemies with the abilities of int or wisdom. Because it's part religion, ritual, mystery. It's ancient practices, ancient versions of arcane magic that you're kind of delving into. And you kind of get this patron which instructs them the way of the mystical familiar. This sounds a lot like the Pathfinder one. I'm curious as to when this came out, actually. Now I'm going to check something in my time after we're done here. But there is a little bit of that Pathfinder witch in this one, I'm not going to lie. I don't know which came first. But this is a wizard, not its own class. At least in 4E. Again, it's a different version of that. You use the basic character creation rules, but you have a character advancement table, and, you know, a witch doesn't have some of the class features. Arcane Implement Mastery, Ritual Casting, and Spellbook goes away, but you gain a Familiar, a Moon Coven, and Augury. There you go. You switched out some things. 10 plus con, 4 hit points, bonus to will, 6 plus con for healing surges. Let's talk, of course, your familiar, your cantrips, and your moon. Because this is where we are an augury, too. Being unique. Augury, of course, we'll start with that one. Why not? It's the last one I mentioned, but I can do that, totally. It's an innate power with otherworldly connections. It's a daily power that you have. You must use it during an extended rest as a daily power. When you ask a question and receive vague notions of the future. You can see if action is positive or negative. It could be a single image. It's basically a rest power that you can get ask the GM for help. The DM for help. I feel like that's a little bit of that there. Anyway. Then you do get a familiar. Which receives gifts of arcane power from patron, archfey, god, devil, angel, demon, other powerful being. They might not be aware that the patron's true ability. The witch's familiar kind of connects with this. Tiny creature. And has its own unique personality. You get the arcane familiar feat. You can confer with your familiar to replace one of your wizard daily attack powers or utility one with another of the same type. When you rest, must be a power of the same level. When you reach 24, you're enabled to use an action point on your turn to regain the use of an expended encounter attack power with your familiar. Instead of taking an extra action, if you do, you gain combat advantage against every target of that power the next time you use it during the encounter. So basically, you get 2 things. You can, during extended rest, switch your powers. One of them. So it's not the same kind of variety a wizard normally has, but it does mean a wizard specifically chooses between 2 daily or 2 utility, and then uses one of them in certain numbers. This one, well, I'm just switching. I can switch 1 per extended rest, but I can just switch it. It's a pretty powerful ability, and it does give that variety a wizard has, but in a different way. Because now, instead of choosing from 2, still choose from any from that list. It does give you a little bit more variety. You get the 3 cantrips. Cantrips of your choice. There is some ones that have options from other books they mention, and one that was introduced in this book. You also have a Moon Coven. Coven which you are kind of created with, which there are benefits from it. You gain benefits from that coven. The two that are listed here are Dark Moon Coven and Full Moon Coven, which grants you a power and additional benefits. Like the Dark Moon gives you the Dread Presence, and you're trained in the Intimidate skill and gain bonuses to it in Stealth at 5th level. The Full Moon gives you the Glorious Presence power, trained in Heal, and gain bonuses to it in Diplomacy. So, as a witch, you would gain 2 first level at will, 1 first level daily, the 3 cantrips from the wizard, granted by the witch cantrips, basically, because witch has cantrips. The Chameleon Mask is an option too. Player's Handbook has other cantrips, and Here's the Fallen Lands has other cantrips. So those are kind of like the 3 cantrippy places you look, but Chameleon Mask is an extra one that was added in here. The encounter powers, of course, in this case, are granted depending on your first level encounter powers. Hey, my cup, Dread Presence, and Glorious Presence are your first level encounter powers. After that, you, of course, would kind of go into them depending on just which direction you want to choose from, and it just ends up being you are a slightly different controller. There are a bunch of witch powers they're introduced with, so keep those in mind that you are going to be going into the witch powers. Yes, we've talked about a number of powers that are on the basic wizard list, but yeah, you're more going to be the witch powers at this point in time, which are replacing them. So there is some similarity with the wizard in some ways, and basically these are new wizard powers. And the thing is, I will tell you, you're still a wizard, you can still use the other powers. The witch powers are just better for a witch, kind of in a way. They're more built for witch stuff. But any wizard could choose any of these powers, technically. You're still a wizard. Any wizard could use them. You could choose the daily powers, Bewitching Charm or Charm of Forbiddance. As a wizard, technically, they are a wizard daily attack. You could choose from the ones in all the other wizard books. But, you know, these are your, it depends on the type of wizard you want to be, too. But they do have a lot of the witch flavor in the powers in the book. So if you want to look at the Heroes of the Feywild and that. Again, the interesting change in the variety that comes from the familiar and the coven abilities is really where you get into the differences that make a witch in a lot of ways. And the new abilities introduced in here that are very, well, witchy. Again, you can really go to any kind of wizard daily ability of the various levels. But there are new ones. Alright, now there is one other one in this book. Here's the Feywild that we have to talk about. Because we're almost done anyway, too. The Protector Druid. Yeah, we're a different type of Druid now. We only have 2 more of these that we talk about, and then we finish up a little bit. There is a little bit more to talk about. They are another version of a Druid, but they are more defensive in their use of natural law. So they're kind of a controller, but they're taking a little bit of that like maybe defender, leader, defense, leader kind of defensive abilities. Wisdom con, Dex, 12 plus con, 5 hit points, bonuses to reflex will, 7 plus con, healing surges. So again, you're using the basic character creation in advancement. And the difference is you lack certain class features. You don't have Balance of Nature, Ritual Casting, or Wild Shape, and instead you gain Nature's Growth, Druid Circle, which does determine your Primal Aspect, Primal Attunement, and Summon Nature's Ally. You also gain Druid Attack Powers. You have used to Summon Nature's Allies who level advance. Rather than gaining the attack powers that are daily attack powers, you get Summon Nature's Ally. So, hey, I don't get my dailies as a Protector Druid. I get some of Nature's Out. Let's talk about that, because it becomes more powerful as level up, too. So Nature's Growth, again, which is one of your things that you gain, is an encounter power. It's an area burst within 10. It makes something difficult terrain. So very controllery, very, that area over there, difficult terrain for everything. I throw it out on my enemies. Now you get a circle, Druid Circle. The group of Druids you kind of belong to as a Protector Druid. Circle of Renewal and Circle of Shelter are the two that were introduced here. The Circle of Renewal gains you Primal Guardian when you're not wearing heavy armor, or use your Constitution modifier in place of Dex or Intelligence modifier to AC. And Healing Growth, an ally in your Nature's Growth zone, or adjacent to it, spends a healing surge to regain hit points. They gain additional points equal to Con modifier. Hey, remember I said I'm adding a little bit of that Defender Leader kind of abilities to your controller here as this type of Druid. Protected. I said we were going to do it. The Circle of Shelter. You and you're not wearing heavy armor, you gain +1 to speed. And your allies ignore the difficult terrain created by your Nature's Growth. So now I can create the Nature's Growth and not have to worry about it. You get Primal Attunement. You get 3 Primal Attunement powers of your choice. They do supply a couple of them here, 5 different ones. One of them which being Encounter, and the other 4 being at-will powers. And they are all combination of minor and standard actions. There's one standard that's an at-will, Call of Spirits. And then you have Air Spirits, Sense the Wild, Verdant Touch, and Vine Ropes that are all at-wills. Of course, Verdant Touch is an encounter power rather than a at-will. And they have various effects that are very controlled. They're cantrips, kind of things. Then you get, of course, your daily Druid ability, which is Summon Nature Allies. And you gain multiple uses of it. Rather than having any other daily powers, you start with 1 use of it at 1st level. At 5th level, you can use it twice, and 9th level, you can use it 3 times per day, the maximum number of times. And you don't gain the daily powers other than that you normally would have. So I want to talk about this one, because this is a big part of their class abilities. You summon a creature of the primal aspect of your level or lower. Hey, a Primal Guardian, a Primal Predator. It appears in an occupied space within range, is an ally to you and your allies. It lacks actions of its own. Instead, you spend your actions to command it mentally, choosing from the actions of the creature's description. You have to have line of effect to command it. When you command it, you and your creature share knowledge, but not senses. When it makes a check, you make it using your game statistics, not including any temporary bonuses or penalties. It lasts until it drops to 1 hit point, at which point you lose a healing surge, or hit points equal to surge if you have no surges left. Otherwise, it lasts until you dismiss it with a minor action, or the end of the encounter. They list a bunch of Primal Guardians in the book. For 1st level, a couple 1st level ones, 15th level, and 29th level for primary Guardians, and same with Predator. So there's ones that you can see in the book that you can use. And you choose Predator or Guardian for the primal abilities in your summon. And also, remember your circle also choose something. Circle of Shelter gives you Primal Predator. Circle of Renewer gives you Primal Guardian. Ah! That determines the group that you have. That you can do. But yes, they level up as you level up too. And then, of course, you get the rest of there's some new Druid powers that you can choose from, and you just basically choose your at-will and encounter and utility powers as a normal Druid would. You just have replaced those dailies with a summon. And that's a Protector. An interesting version from Heroes of Feywild of a Druid. I do like these a lot. Now, there's one final one that I can talk about in detail today, because it's the only book I have left, and this is from the Heroes of the Elemental Chaos, and this is Sha'ir, Wizard. Using magic granted by your Gen Servant, you take control of the battlefield, draw forces of elemental energy, intelligence, and constitution. So, yes, they basically have connections to an elemental creature. You use the basic controls, but they lack a lot of features of a normal wizard. They don't have arcane implement mastery, you don't have ritual casting, you don't have a spellbook, and instead you get a Gen Servant and elemental resistance. 10 plus con hit points, 4 per level, 2 plus bonuses to will, 6 plus con for healing. Let's talk about those class features. The Gen Servant, and of course, the elemental resistance, and a few other things. So effectively, you gain the Arcane Familiar feat. You can choose a familiar normally available to Wizard, or one of the familiars available only to Sha'irs, which are described below. It's basically a version of a Arcane Familiar, except it's made of elemental substance. You have to think about this. It's like, it's a hawk, except it's made of elementals. Or made of, like, fire. You know, that kind of thing. I don't remember if there's a hawk in the familiar. And at the end of an extended rest, when your familiar returns from your adventures into the elemental chaos, you can choose to replace one of your daily powers or utility powers with another one of your levels. So very much similar to the Witch's ability to change things around. But it then provides, of course, 4 different familiar or elemental familiar choices. You gain 4 cantrips, just like from all the cantrip choices of the wizard. And then you have elemental resistance. At the end of each extended rest, you choose an element: acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder. And until the next extended rest, you and your allies have resistance to that damage type while they're adjacent to the familiar when it's in its active mode. Resistance is equal to your con modifier. And at 20th first level, it doubles. You start with 8 wizard powers of your choice. Of course, the 2 at will, 1 encounter, 1 daily, and 4 cantrips. And they do suggest the ones introduced in this book are very good for, you know, the class you're choosing, but you can choose from any. But they introduced some new cantrips and at-will powers, daily powers, utility powers. They're just like, hey, these are really good for this type of wizard. So, interestingly, it's another one that has some similarities to a witch, but the elemental resistance and some of the abilities you have, and then, of course, the active benefits and constant benefits of these familiars, in particular as you choose, can be where you go to for choosing. So it just adds another level of variety. We can see the similarity to the Witch. Now there are 2 controllers that I know about only by name, and I wasn't able, well, one controller that we can talk about here, the Hunter Ranger. It was just unfortunate that I was unable to get a copy of the Hunter Ranger book. I've talked about this in other unfortunate things like here. But if you want to look into the Hunter Ranger as a controller that you want to play in the future, it is in the Heroes of the Forgotten Kingdom. They are martial and primal power level controller that uses strength or dex, and they are under control. And the last thing to mention, of course, here is multi-classing, the hybrid classes. Now, these were introduced in Player's Handbook 3, and unlike the multi-classing feats that were introduced in Player's Handbook 1, these are true multi-classes between classes. Now, all the ones that were introduced that are hybrid classes are the Wizard, Druid, Invoker, Psion, Seeker. You might be able to do some of the more unique, like Mages, you know, the Mage Wizard. You might be able to do that with a hybrid. I'm not 100% sure. You'd have to look it up yourself. But they also did actually introduce the Hybrid Warlock Binder in Dragon Magazine 400. But the hybrid classes are effectively you're taking 2 classes at once. They've got specific rules for hybridization classes in Player's Handbook 3 from 4th edition. So if you want to look into a hybrid controller where you're doing 2 controllers, controller and some other class, that's where you look into it. I'm not going to dive in depth about it again. I talked about it in the previous video. So I think I talked about in my first video when we talked about defenders. But there you go. That's controllers. We ended here for today. So, it's an interesting thing to see that controllers are still really interesting and really cool classes to play. Yes, a lot of their abilities are probably less useful in certain ways. I think I've talked about this, that there is a primary importance for certain abilities. Defenders are meat sponges. They're made to take attention. They're made to be very helpful. Them and leaders, if I had a defender and a leader, I could have a team that I feel like would go. One's healing, the other's keeping the attention. Striker adds for that extra damage to not have to worry about his heavy healing and stuff like that. Controller adds to multi-target hits and some movement and statuses around the battlefield. Those are useful. It's not that they aren't useful. But, again, not as sometimes useful as the others. It's this interesting thing that there was only one controller in the original player's handbook. So think about that. Did every team of characters need a wizard? No. And I think that's something that reflects the overall requirements of a controller. Granted, if I have a team that already has a defender, a striker, and a leader, me playing a controller, probably not a terrible idea. It's going to balance out things a little bit more. It's going to fill in gaps a little bit more. And it's going to help with things like multiple targets. If there's a bunch of minion characters, I could probably nuke all of them, get rid of them from the board, and make things a lot easier for my team. That's where controllers really shine a lot. They do have heavy use and heavy importance, but they work best with the others. And I think that's where Oops All controllers never worked in 4th edition. Again, 4th edition, we're still in that time period of D&D where having a little bit of balance and roles in your team is important. Not necessarily critical, but it still is important. And I'm not going to insult controllers by saying, don't play one. It's just that, you know, consider at least having a little bit more balance, depending on how many players you have. If you already have a team and you already have, let's say, honestly, a defender and a leader in your team, or maybe even like a defender and a striker, you playing controller is not going to be too bad with those 3 players. Yeah, a leader probably going to be very helpful with healing, but do that out of combat with your kind of shorter rests, use some healing surges. It's not impossible to do that. So it's again, like, you have to understand the aspects of combat. And controllers are your difficult classes, I think, to play, in a way. Because strikers are very straightforward. Choose one guy, kill it. Leaders are pretty straightforward. Keep your guys alive. Defenders are pretty straightforward. Choose one guy, make him stay fighting me. Controllers are your advanced class. Your more challenging class. Your more challenging, you know, I mean class, like educational class, like a class in school, but that class anyway. 2 uses of the same word there. That was a little confusing there. Your field of study, your more challenging field of study. Your the gifted classes in school, not gifted. I don't think it's the proper word for it anymore. That was during old times. I don't know what it's called nowadays. Advanced fields of study that you're going to go into. That's a controller. You have to understand the battlefield a lot more. You have to have this much more knowledge and control. Where am I blowing up things? Where am I targeting multiple people? Where am I moving my friends around to? The controller is more difficult, more advanced, but it also has a use to it in a lot of ways. Again, not as critical, I feel, as some of the other roles, but still very useful to your 4E teams. So, and with a lot of the variety that was introduced past Wizard, it made it more viable. I think that was the important thing, too, is just having all Wizards, not bad, but didn't have the same viability as Wizard, Druid, Invoker, Psion, Seeker, and all the other specialized type of ones I talked about, which are really cool and added different layers to your other classes there. The controllers were developed, but it took time. And I think that's an important part. Anyway, I will leave it here now. I hope you enjoyed this. This is the end of the class guide. I'm not sure what I'll do next for 4E. I probably will do some more content in the future. But for now, we are reached the end. We've talked about all the classes. I hope you understand the roles of classes. You have an idea of all the different classes you can play. And you've got, maybe I've talked about some of them that interest you, and I talked about one that makes you feel like, you know what, I want to try 4E. Because I'm telling you, 4E, it requires a VTT, a virtual tabletop. This is the time period of virtual tabletops for playing a game. You, me, we're on the internet, we're ready to play it. So, go to your Alchemies, your Roll20s, any of those other ones that are out there. Go check them out. Play some 4E. Have some fun. Now's the time period to try it out. And it definitely works a lot better. And it's not a terrible system. It's a fun system. It's not like any of the other D&Ds, to a degree. But certainly, there'll be a little bit familiar. So I hope you enjoyed this deep dive now that the series is complete. Yeah. Anyway, if you want to check out more of my stuff, I talk about tabletop stuff Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. I go live on Twitch and then put it up on YouTube later on, so always check it out early to mid-afternoon for those ones there. Saturday's a backup day if I miss those. Crimson Queen is my live play of Pathfinder 1st Edition. Either go check it out live now or archived up on YouTube. It's the current game-ism time of this video. I highly recommend it. That's the Pathfinder 1st Edition. Fun, 9 p.m. Eastern in the evening. Discussing tabletop on Saturdays. It's a no-brainer. We talk about news of the week and deeper discussion topics. And, yeah, I have social media links below. Hey, everybody out there. Hope you enjoyed this dive into the past. And I'm going to go find out if, when The Witch came out. And apparently, here's the Feywild. I got to figure out when that book was released. And then, yeah. Compare that. The Pathfinder has things. I'm a little curious at that one. I really am. Okay, wait. It came out in 2000. One E. Advanced Player's Guide. When did we release Advanced Player's Guide? That's what it was. I called it the wrong thing. Sorry, I got sidetracked here as I was saying goodbye. Yeah, when we released Advanced Player's Guide? I'm finding that out. Because I'm curious. Same year. Right? No? No, 2010. Hey, it came out first. Someone copy Paizo! Not the first time. Anyway, bye! Farewell! I might cut some of that off.